Okay. Hilchos Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos. We are in the third chapter. This chapter will discuss the things that you can and cannot do before Shabbos. Not the things on Shabbos that will come later. This is before Shabbos. It is permissible to start a work, any kind of labor before Shabbos, even though it will continue and be finished on Shabbos. Because the prohibition, the biblical prohibition, is only about the work, the labor that we do on the day itself of Shabbos. However, when you do a work and it will continue on its own on Shabbos, we are able to have, or permitted to have, the pleasure thereof of that work that took place on its own on Shabbos. Ketzad, halacha 2. What kind of examples? He's going to give several examples of here. Basically, if you open up the irrigation of your garden on the eve of Shabbos, before Shabbos, the and it continues going the entire day of Shabbos, it is permissible. Second example, that we take incense and we light it before Shabbos, and that fragrance is continuing through the entire Shabbos. You can have the pleasure thereof. Number 3, manichim kilor al gav ha'ayem esvanis al gabi makeh. If you're taking some kind of medication and putting it on the eye, and you put a bandage over the wound, and it is healing the individual through the entire Shabbos, it is permitted. Again, why? You started this before Shabbos. Fourth example, if you took dyes or herbs before Shabbos, and you put some material in there, and it is now dyeing the material in the entire Shabbos. It is permitted to take those strands of material, put it into there, and it is creating the dye through the entire Shabbos. Another example is if you put traps out for wild animals, for chickens and fish before Shabbos, and it is collecting these fish, the animals, throughout Shabbos, it is permitted. In other words, just the trapping. We're not talking about doing anything else, of course. Now, another example, 6, Tayanim Bekeres Base Habadi Gule Hagas Im Chashecha. If you have an olive press or this round stone, and it is now by itself, it is pressing, and coming out of there is the fluid or the olive oil and the like, it is permitted. Likewise, we can light a candle or make a fire from before Shabbos, and it continues the entire Shabbos, it is permissible. Halacha 3. Now, when it comes to cooking, there is a distinction, though. Not everything that we cook we're allowed to, because there is a principle here of the fear that we might have when it comes to cooking, that we're always interested in making sure the food is going to be cooked the best way possible. So here there is a distinction. So about putting food on the fire, putting it into the oven where there's coals and so on, where it's going to cook the entire Shabbos. So you'd start it before Shabbos and you're going to eat it on Shabbos. But there are things that are prohibited. Why? Because we're concerned that you might stoke or stir the coals to better the food. That way you're going to eat a better food, and especially if you have guests, you're always concerned about this. So the rest of the chapter is going to deal with this issue of cooking things, putting it before Shabbos, but yet where are we permitted? When are we not permitted? What are the instances that allowed and not allowed? Halacha 4, Kesem. Tavshil shel basar kol tzarka v'chamin shalei huchem kol tzarka. So if you have a dish of meat that it was not completely cooked, or a food that needs to be that was not completely heated up, or even if you do have some meat um, that it was completely cooked. But yet the more longer it cooks, like a chulin, the better it is. Right. So even though it is cooked, but keeping it there, it is better. You're not allowed to keep this on the fire on Shabbos. Even though you put it there before Shabbos began, Zera, there's a decree. What is the decree over here? Perhaps you're going to stir the coals in order to complete its cooking, or maybe it's completely cooked, but the longer it cooks, the better it's going to be. So this is Shema Yachta is the Hebrew term. Shema, perhaps, Yachta, you're going to stir Gecholim, the coals. Lefikach, therefore he continues, when is it permissible? When are you able then to do it? Im garafa eish, if you remove the coals, or shekisa eish akira be'efar, or you cover the fire of this oven with ash, or you put the thin chips of flax, or the coal are merely embers that are dying out. They're as if they're covered with ash, or it is being fueled by straw, or by straw, stubble, or feces of an animal, meaning that it's not a real fire. It's a fire that's not going to be complete, or it's not going to be strong fire. Then that instance, it is permissible to put your food and let it cook from before Shabbos. Because you're forgetting, you're not thinking about it, because it's not a strong fire that you need to control in order to make sure the food is good. Therefore, the decree was not made in such an instance by the rabbis. Halacha number 4. Now we're going to go into different types of ovens, and you can see before you the first example that we're going to speak about. When we said now that it is permissible, when is this permissible? It's called it's talking about a stove called a kira that has 2 openings for pots on top. That it's like a slow cooker. It's not a very hot and intense heat of a tanner, but a tanner, which is an oven as it's translated, has an intense heat. It only has 1 pot, and because it comes to only one direction, it's not in multiple directions. Therefore, it's very intense. Even then, when you took out the coals, or you covered it with ash, or you were using fuel of stubble or of straw, then you're not allowed to use such an oven. Not the kira that you have in before you, but if it was a tanner, the word tanner, that form of oven would not be permissible. Not on top of it, not even next to it. A dish that was not completely cooked, or something was even completely cooked, but the longer you keep it on, the better it is for it. Why? Because the heat that is being produced over here in this sort of oven, it's a different kind of oven, is of an intense heat. Because the intense heat, you're concerned that maybe it's going to ruin the food. And therefore, we're concerned that maybe you're going to come and stir the coals, or even if it was just straw or stubble, whatever the case might be, even though it is these kind of lesser energy-giving kind of fire. Halacha 6. So you might ask a question. Why? We just said that it's not that you took away the coals. So if you took away the coals from this tanner, the tanner that has the intense heat, then what are you worried about? There's nothing there that you're going to be stirring. So he says, because you can only remove most of it. These are the kind of ovens that you can't really totally clean it out. For sure there's going to be something left over, and as a result of that, and since the flame is very strong in this kind of oven, therefore we're concerned that maybe you're going to stir the again, we're not talking here about stirring the pot, we're talking here about stirring the coals, or even if it was stubble, that you're going to stir it, whatever the case may be, because something is left there. Now, we spoke about a kira that has very low intensity heat. We spoke about a toner which high intensity heat. Now we're speaking about a kupach, hevel yirav, hevel akira, umat hevel toner. This is the in-between kind of oven. Seems like they had more ovens back then than we do today. Types of ovens, at least. This is in between. It is hotter than the kira, but not as intense heat as the toner. Therefore, it's got an in-between law if you were using the fuel of gefis, is used wood or gefis is used for this. It's considered like a toner. So then you're not allowed, because then it's like a toner. It's like the more intense one. This kind of fuel, for even though you took out the coals, remember you can't take it fully out, or you covered them with ash, nonetheless you're not allowed to in that instance. However, if you use straw and stubble, which is a much weaker form of fuel, then it's considered like a kira, like the least type of oven in maintaining heat. You're allowed then in that instance to use the kupach form of oven. Kira malkam sifsas shtei kederes kubach malkam sifsas kedera achas. So he's just describing the kubach is a kubach has place for one pot, and the kira has a place for two pots. Halacha 8. Now, we're going to speak about types of food that you could put on and you can't put on from, again, before Shabbos. And the concern, of course, is that we want to make better the food, and therefore we're going to stoke the coal, the energy source that is cooking. So if you put in there food that was not cooked at all, or it was completely cooked, but in stomach virala, and if you cooked it further, it actually makes it worse. That at instance, all three types of ovens, whether it is the least, which is a kira, or the middle one, the kupach, or the most intense heat one, the tanner, in those instances, you can keep the food on the oven. And likewise, a dish that was cooked but was not completely cooked, or it was completely cooked, and keeping it cooked, it is still going to make it better. But if it was completely cooked, but you put something right before it became sunset, you put in a piece of meat that is fresh, that is not at all cooked, then it's considered like the entire dish is like an uncooked dish, and it's only starting from new at that moment. And then you can keep it on the fire even though you did not remove the coals and you didn't even cover it with ash, because you're not thinking about it. The whole idea is here, are you thinking about it? Are you worried? Are you concerned? You're not thinking about it. And you're not going to come to stir the coals because you're just putting in this fresh piece of meat, and that's going to take some time, and you're not worried. We're worried about that Friday evening. You're going to be stirring the coals. Why? Because you're going to have a dinner, and you're going to want to have the food exactly the way you want it, or for your guests that it should be perfect for them. But if you put it now with just this fresh piece of meat, well, it's not going to get cooked in time, and therefore you're not thinking about it because you're only making that dish for the following day, like the chulent, for example. So then we're not concerned. Halacha number 9. Kol tafshishal now, what happens if you actually took a food and you're not allowed to put it, right? You cooked it, and it's good to keep it cooking further, right? And you transgressed, and you did that. Also, Shabbos. You can't eat from that food on Shabbos because you purposely did that when you weren't supposed to do it. You have to wait till after Shabbos. Or not only you have to wait till after Shabbos, you have to wait the entire time period that it would take you to cook that food. And then only after that, if it would take an hour, 2 hours to cook that food, after Shabbos, wait an hour, 2 hours, what it is, then you can eat that food. But what if you did it mistakenly? Right? You forgot, I forgot this food. I'm not allowed to cook before Shabbos because I might stir the coals in this particular instance. If it's a dish that was not completely cooked, also add to Shabbos, then you have to wait until after Shabbos. But if it is a food that is completely cooked, but it's just better to keep it on the oven because, it keeps it, the longer it cooks, the better this food gets. That food, you're actually allowed to eat it on Shabbos. Halacha number 10. 10. Anything that is permitted to keep it on the fire, Shabbos, when you take it off on Shabbos, you're not allowed to return it. You took it off the fire, you're not allowed to return it. However, you could return it. You're not allowed to return it unless it is on this kira oven type, right? Which is the least intense heat. Which is the least intense heat that is being heated by. So when it comes to the least, then it can only be when it's with grufa, that is the form of energy that's being used, or coals, grufa coals, sorry, in such an instance, right? Then you could return, or by the kira and kira is the middle one. I'm sorry. Kira v'kupach you could use with stubble and straw. But that's only in an instance when you didn't put the pot that was on the flame or on the oven, put it on the ground. As long as you're holding it and you have in mind to put it back, so in those instances you can put it on. But when you put it on the ground, then you're not allowed to put it back. So what we do is actually we put it like at the edge of the table, so that way it's sort of it's not stable on its own and we're holding on to it. That's how we deal with such a thing when we're allowed to put it back on. But I feel look at so similarly, the food may not be returned on the oven or on the kopach when it's heated with the gefis, which is this coals or the wood, despite the fact the one that's already removed or covered the coals. Why? Because it's very hot, right? We're talking about the coals here. So whenever food should not be returned to the original place where it was cooking, it should also not be placed next to it to warm it up, okay? Now, how about a ladle? You want a ladle, right? Also, you're not allowed, it's prohibited to put a ladle into the food on Shabbos. It's on the oven, right? As long as the fire is still going, because through stirring it, you're increasing the cooking from the stirring. Stirring helps the cooking when it's on the fire. And that's like you're cooking on Shabbos. And you're allowed to take it from one kira to another kira oven. Right? Kira was the middle type. Kupach, lowest. Kira, tanur, in intensity of cooking. Even from one kira oven that is the heat is less to one that is even more, you're allowed to. But you're not allowed to do it from, one second, excuse me. Oh, sorry. From a kira that is covered to a kira that is not covered. The oven covered, because when it's covered, it is greater heat. Halacha 12. Now we're going to discuss about the types of food, right? That is the issue about cooking. The types of food. A person shouldn't fill up the pot with peas or beans, or with water, and put it into the heat, this intense tanner before Shabbos, right before Shabbos, and leave it. Why? Or anything that is similar to this, even though we learned earlier that if it's not, you put it completely uncooked, seemingly it was okay. It would be okay. Why? Because when it comes to peas and beans, they don't need that much cooking. When it comes to meat, it needs to cook for an hour, 2 hours, and so on. So therefore, we're not concerned when you put it in completely uncooked right before Shabbos. But something that's going to take 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or for example, so then we are concerned that you're going to now stir the coals. Because your mind is on it, because I'm cooking this for, shortly to be able to eat for the meal now. Therefore, you cannot put it on the tanner. And what if you did it purposefully? Right? Did you put it in this kind of food that gets cooked quickly? Then you have to wait until after Shabbos. You're not allowed to eat it on Shabbos, and you have to wait until it would take that time to cook, the 20 minutes or whatever it is, and then you could eat it after Shabbos. Remember, this is only this is a gzera, this is a decree, because we're making a fence around the law in order to make sure a person should not do something in a biblical prohibition of stirring the coals. Halacha 13. Now we're going to do things the other way around, right? Now we spoke about something that cooks very quickly. How about the opposite? What if you put into the oven a meat, and you're leaving it there over Shabbos? If it's kid goat, then you're allowed to. Because kid goat is a very meat doesn't need much. So therefore, we're not worried that you're going to go and stir the coals, because when you stir the coals, you're making the heat more intense, and the kid goat meat doesn't need the intensity. So we're not worried that you're going to do that, because you don't want to do that. It's going to ruin the meat. But if it was not kid goat, but it was a mature goat meat of an A's, or it was from a cow, then it would be prohibited. Why? Because there it needs more cooking. You want more intense heat. However, if the oven in question over here is sealed with tar, then it's permissible. Because in such an instance, if one sealed the opening of the oven, right, with clay, right? So roasting these kind of meats would be allowed. It's permitted. Why? Because if you would open the oven to stir the coals, the wind would enter and cause the meat to harden and spoil. You got to know your meats. The sages knew their meats, and therefore they knew in such an instance it wouldn't be good, and therefore we're not concerned that a person is going to get so carried away and forget Shabbos laws. The oven will cool suddenly, and the meat will spoil. So in such an instance, we're not concerned. Halacha 14. Likewise, any type of wind that will enter into the cooking area that's going to spoil it. So we're not concerned that you're going to stir, because remember, when you're stirring, you have to open up, and you're opening up, wind is coming in, and it's going to now ruin things for that type of food. So we're not concerned. Therefore, in such an instance, we can place strands of flax into the oven to bleach before Shabbos enters. Why? Because opening the oven is going to spoil it. Got to know your materials too. Halacha 15. However, we spoke about putting some meat of a goat, right? Kid goat, right? Where the meat is doesn't need that much cooking. However, if you put a complete kid, an entire kid meat into the oven, then it's like any other kind of meat. Then you're not allowed to leave it on the fire, because it is considered like regular meat, because it's the complete animal, and we're worried that you're going to stir, unless you cover the entire opening of the oven with clay. In that instance, we're not concerned. However, when is there a time that we do roast a lamb? That is on the Eve of Pesach, right? The mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So there, we don't have this decree. Even if you don't seal the oven, why not? It's because there you're doing that with a group of people. Remember, our concern over here is people are going to forget at Shabbos. They're so concerned about their food, and they're just going to, let me just double check and make sure everything's okay over here. And you're going to stir the coals, and that's a biblical prohibition. But here you're with a group of people, because the Korban Pesach is done with a group of people. There we know that other people are, because you're doing a mitzvah with a group of people. Everybody's going to remind each other, and we're not worried there. Halacha 16. Meat, onions, or eggs should not be roasted on an open fire, unless it can be roasted before Shabbos, right, to the point that it is fit to eat. And if after it's completely cooked before Shabbos, it's okay to keep it on the open fire, and that it gets more cooked. Why? Because the more it gets cooked, the worse it is. The longer you keep the eggs on a fire, then once it's cooked, not so good. So we're not worried you're going to stir, because stirring is only going to make the flame stronger. That means that it's going to cook even more, so we're not worried. Therefore, therefore, as a result of this, we're allowed to leave the incense in the vessels when before it becomes Shabbos, because then if you're going to stir the coals, you're going to damage the clothes. Because of the smoke, you're going to create smoke, and you're going to damage your clothes. The incense was done with material and so on, and we're not worried in such an instance. Halacha 17. So now he's coming. What do we learn from all this? What's the principle over here? So he says, Shekol davar she'eino osim binyan zeh eino osim mishum shehu nasa b'Shabbos. Why are we making a decree over here? It's not because he did something on Shabbos. We're talking about the whole prohibition is not something you did on Shabbos. But the decree is that perhaps you're going to stir, you're going to stoke the coals on Shabbos, right? So therefore, before Shabbos. Therefore, as a result of that, you don't put material into a vat. Unless it was removed from the fire. Why? Because maybe you're going to stir, because it's going to make it better for this for the tzemer, for the wool to have more intense heat. And that is when the vat should be sealed or closed with clay. Because you might stir the dye after nightfall. Halacha 18. Now, back in the day, today we have pita, right? So pita, is so the way they made bread back then was like pita. You put it on the wall of the oven, right? So you don't put the bread on the wall of the oven before Shabbos. Nor should we place the cake on the coals, right? Unless they've already have a crust to it. If they have a crust to it, that means they are completely they're almost completely baked, and therefore we're not concerned in such an instance of stirring. Then we're not concerned, because once the crust is already there on the bread, the more you're going to stir the coals, the worse you're going to make it. So therefore, in such an instance, we're not concerned. So now what happens if you put the bread there on the side of the oven purposefully? You did it willfully. Also, you have to wait until after Shabbos, even though you didn't cook on Shabbos. You didn't even do anything. You didn't stir the coals. Remember? But since you did something you weren't supposed to, you have to wait till after Shabbos to eat it, and you have to wait the time that it would take to bake it. But if you did it mistakenly, then you can take, since bread is a mitzvah on Shabbos, you have to break bread, you have to make a mitzi, so take enough for the 3 meals that you need on Shabbos, and removing it, you have to be careful that you should use a knife or something similar to it in its removal. Halacha 19. A person can make a fire from any substance he desired. Whether he kindles it on the ground or it's a torch holder, and you can light from it from before Shabbos, and you can use the light thereof. Here we're talking about ovens still now. Now we're talking about if you have a flame oven, a torch that you want to have light from it. You can use it for its light, or for the heat, because it's cold times. However, you have to light this bonfire or this torch, most of it before sunset, until the flame is completely consumed. And if most of it was not consumed of this torch, also, Shabbos, you cannot have pleasure from it on Shabbos. Why? Because since it's not completely, or the majority of it's not has taken hold on this torch, right? Therefore, we're afraid that maybe you're going to play with it in order that you can light the majority of it. Therefore, you cannot. You're not allowed to use it on Shabbos. Also, if it's just a single piece of wood, you have to kindle the majority of its thickness, the majority of the circumference before Shabbos enters. Again, same principle. Halacha 21. If the fire is made of reeds or seeds, it's It's not necessary to light the majority. If it's a log, you need the majority. But in these instances of reeds or seeds, not necessary. But if you started the fire and it's not majority consumed, you can use it on Shabbos and pleasure from it. Why? Because these are materials that take hold of fire very quickly. And you won't need to stir it on Shabbos. But if you now bundle a bunch of these reeds together, right? So in such an instance, then it becomes like the log, and therefore it's got the law the law of the log, and a majority has to have taken hold. Halacha 22, the final one. Medura shel zephis, I shall gafris, I shall ravav, I shall kira, I shall kash, I shall gavava. When a fire is fueled by tar or sulfur or oily substance or wax, straw or stubble, it doesn't need a majority to be kindled before Shabbos begins. Why? Because these substances quickly catch fire. Whew. Okay. Thank you, Label, for doing.
Okay, chapter number 4, Perek Revi. So the previous chapter we talked a lot about different types of ovens and ranges, stove tops inside the oven, etc. And now we're going to be talking about something else, something different, and this is the concept of putting your hot pot, let's say, and wrap it in something else in order to keep it warm. And that is the concept we're going to be talking about in chapter 4. So halacha aleph, number 1. Yesh dvarim shim tamam ben atavshil. There are certain things that if you take a food, you take a cooked food and you put it inside of it, it becomes even warmer. And it could even make it hotter, like as if it was on the fire. Right? So on the fire, obviously you're cooking it, but there's certain things that the rabbi said that those things we should not, we should be careful because those add in the temperature. They make it warmer. And it gives examples. Kigoin, for example, there's gefes. Gefes was mentioned before. It's a certain type of heating oil, I think. Zevel, which is manure, melach, salt, seed, lime, choil, sand, or zagin. Zagin is the skins of the grapes. Muchin, which is unprocessed wool, vasavim, and grass. And then the Rambam continues and says, Bisman sheshlashan lachim. These last 3 that he mentioned is only referring to them when they're still wet. Even if it's not wet because you poured water over them, even if they're wet because they're fresh, and therefore they're wet. Udvarim elu nikroim, and the Hebrew term for this, the halachic term for this, is called davar ha'meisif hevel. This is considered something that increases moisif, it increases hevel, heat. Yes, and then there's other things. There's other things that if you put the food into it, it will keep it warm, but it won't make it warmer. It won't add in its heat. It will just keep it to the temperature that it's at right now. And it doesn't add in the cooking process. It holds it back from getting cold. And now he gives also examples, which is zagin, which we mentioned before, the grape skins, umuchin, vasavim, the unprocessed fabrics and grass. But when they're yevashim, when they're dry, right? Before, when they're wet, they add in the heat, but when they're dry, they don't. Uksus, and a garment. Peiros, and fruit, produce, and kanfeyina, pigeon feathers, oides, and these oides hapishton, which is these pieces of the flax after you bang the flax, so the pieces that are left from it, unesaides charashim, and the carpenter's sawdust or wood chips, ushlachin, pelts, gizet semer, and shearings of wool. So dvarim elu nikrain. So now the halachic term for these things are davar she'eino meisif hevel, something that does not add to the heat. It doesn't. It preserves heat, but it doesn't add to the heat. So there's two categories that Rambam brought up. There's things that if you put something hot in it, it will add heat to it, and there's other things that when you put it into it, it doesn't add heat. It just keeps it to the temperature that it's at. It makes sure it doesn't cool down. Halacha base number 2. Minadin haya. So ideally, the din is shetayim davar ha'ma'asav hevel mi'ba'idiyayim v'yishar tavshel tamim b'Shabbos. So ideally, the halacha should have been and could have been that you should be able to put it into something that's ma'asav hevel, something that adds heat. If you do it before Shabbos, because you're even allowed to leave it on the fire on Shabbos, right? As we talked about before. But the sages said no. The sages made it asur to put it into something that adds heat. Why? Because maybe the pot will boil over. It will boil, and then you're going to open it up because when a pot boils, what do? You take the cover off to let it calm down until the boiling relaxes, and then what are you going to do? And then you're going to go and close it b'Shabbos, and that is obviously a no. You can't do that on Shabbos. For sure, you're not allowed to put it on Shabbos into something that adds heat. So the sages said, don't put it in before Shabbos, so you shouldn't come to do it by mistake on Shabbos. Therefore, you're allowed to put it into something that adds heat bein hashmashes. If it's right before Shabbos, because it already was on it's hot, so it already boiled over. It was already on and it won't boil over again. It already calmed down. It won't go over. It won't boil over again. I just wanted to mention, we're talking about a lot of halachas, a lot of technical details. We don't necessarily paskin like the Rambam, and when you have a question, you should definitely ask your rabbi to make sure that you're doing it according to halacha. I think the beautiful thing that we have from here, I tell people sometimes, you have to know what to ask. From the Rambam, you'll know certain instances that this is a question. This is something that you thought, it's okay. You never had an issue. Now it could be based on the Rambam. You could know what to ask. So it also adds in knowing what to ask. Halacha number 3, Gimel. Also, theoretically, it should have been that you could put the food that you should be able to put food into something that doesn't add the heat, but it keeps the temperature. But on Shabbos, but the sages said answered it. The sages made it not permissible. Prohibited it, yeah. Because maybe they will because then maybe they'll put it into the wrong things. They'll put it into ash or coals, and then there's going to be sparks of fire. And if you put a pot down onto some ash or some coals, what are you doing? You're actually mixing the coals, and that's the whole aspect that we talked about in the previous chapter. The whole issue of mixing the coals. That's something we have to be very careful not to do on Shabbos. So therefore, they prohibited to put it into to put davar cham b'Shabbos, put something hot on Shabbos into something, even if it doesn't add in the heat. Even if it doesn't add heat. Halacha number 4. Savik chashecha, savik ein chashecha. If you're not sure if it's dark yet, meaning you're not sure Shabbos came in, it's an in-between time. You're not sure if Shabbos came in yet. Mutar litmain. We're not talking about now that you know it on the clock before everybody had a clock on them or before everybody had their iPhone on them. So mutar litmain is davar acham. You're allowed to put something that's hot. You're allowed to put it into. You're allowed to cover it. Mutar litmain is davar atzayin b'Shabbos b'davar she'ein ma'asav, and you're allowed to put something that's cold. Let's say you have something in the fridge and you want to take it out so it should come down to room temperature. So you're allowed to put it into something that doesn't add in the heat, in order that when you come to eat it, it's not too cold, or there's a chill in it in order to get the chill out of the food before you eat it. Me'erev Shabbos, chamin, something hot that you've covered over since before Shabbos. V'nizgalu b'Shabbos, and it became open on Shabbos, mutar l'chaseisam, you can cover them, sharei einay maisif, because it's not going to add in its heat to mutar l'hachlif akisa b'Shabbos, and you're even allowed to change the cover, what you're using to cover it on Shabbos. Ketzad, let's say, give an example. Neitel ksus, you could take, let's say it's covered with your jacket, or something like that, with a garment. So you could take the garment, umaneach kanfe yoina, and he could put pigeon feathers, or he could take away the pigeon feathers and put a garment instead. Halacha number 5. Halacha hey. Pina hatavshil oy hamayim. If you moved over the food or the water, the hot water, mikli likli acher, from one vessel to another vessel, from one pot to another pot, mutar, it's okay. Mutar, it's okay. Lahat min akli ha'acher b'Shabbos b'davar she'enim ma'asif. So now you're allowed to cover that. You're allowed to cover that. It went from, you had a hot pot. Let's say you had a hot pot of soup. You pour that hot pot of soup into another pot of soup, into another pot, an empty pot, and you want to cover that. You're allowed to cover that with something that does not add heat. It is considered to be something that is cold. Because the whole prohibition of covering on Shabbos is that it's only for something. When did they prohibit it? When you're talking about the first degree, meaning the pot that was on the fire, the pot that became hot, the pot that was used to cook with. But if you moved it over, then it is mutter, then it is okay. Halacha 6. Number 6, halacha vav, manichin meichon. You're allowed to put a metal pot al gabe meichon b'Shabbos on top of another metal pot on Shabbos. Ukedera, and a kedera is another type of pot, an earthenware pot on top of another earthenware pot on Shabbos. Let's say one is warm, and you want to put the other one in order to also to bring it to warm it up a little bit. A pottery pot on top of a metal, or a metal on top of pottery. And you're allowed to close. Today you could get an airtight pot. So what did they do back in the day? They would take dough. They would take dough and they would close off the top, so that way it keeps the heat inside. So you're allowed to do that. Not in order to make it hot, but in order to keep its heat. Because what you're not allowed to do is cover it. Here you're not covering it, you're putting it one on top of the other. So and in this case where you're talking about putting a hot pot on top of another hot pot, in order that they should stay hot, mutar, meaning they both heat together, they should keep each other hot, so to speak, mutar, that is okay. You do not put a pot that has something cold inside on top of a hot pot on Shabbos, because you're making the heat travel, you're making it hot on Shabbos. But if you did it from before Shabbos, mutar, it's okay. And it is not considered to be covering with something that adds heat. Yosef's not here yet. Ta.
I see. You want to give him a call? Yeah, I don't see him. Let me see if he, let's see, end. So the halachas that we just learned, label is trying to get to Yosef. This is called laws of hatmana in the Hebrew term, coming from the word covering, tamun, tmuna, not tmuna like picture. This is with a tes, not with a taf. And these are the laws. So where with the first chapter we spoke about different kinds of ovens, Remember, we had the lowest was a kapach, then a kira, and a tanur. I don't know if they're GE for, or that kind of different companies now. But so we're speaking about the ovens themselves that we're afraid of stirring. So here now we're talking about hatmana, the two types things that increase the heat, and therefore there's a concern there, or it maintains the heat. And then we had the different instances we just learned.
So, Rabbi, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
If you're putting hot soup into like a tureen, a soup tureen,
right?
Pot, are you allowed to cover it? Are you saying you can't cover it?
Sorry, I'm just 1 second. Yosef just messaged me. Will be on in 2 minutes.
Okay.
I have to slip out. Someone's waiting for me.
Okay.
I guess it will be in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So, where are you leaving it on? Are you talking about just covering it?
Just covering it, right?
With towels.
Not a cover
So
for
that's
the
what
pot.
my wife, that's what she does. She makes soup, she makes chicken, she covers it with towels. So towels, you're allowed to do that. It's not adding heat.
Okay.
Not adding heat, right? The substances earlier, there's certain substances that don't just keep the heat, they actually, because we're talking about it's a very, a very tight enclosure of that when the heat is there, it's actually producing more heat. So certain substances do that we had at the beginning, right?
Right.
That was at the beginning discussion. So those things, it wouldn't be allowed because of the increase. But to cover with towels and the like, so those things we can do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions while we wait for Yosef?
Rabbi, I had a quick question.
Sure, go for it.
It may be a little silly, but how does this relate to a crock pot? Are we allowed to keep the glass covering on the crock pot? Do we have to take it off and place the towel on it?
No, crock pot is not a problem. See, one of the things that we do, remember we said, like, if you put something, place it under the coals, that there's a covering, right? So that's called a blech. So today we put a blech. It's a piece of metal on the stove. So it serves as a reminder for us that we should not, we should not play with the temperature. That's one of the things that we do today. Back then, that was the flax that it spoke about, for example. So a crock pot, ideally what you should put is a piece of silver foil from the inside covering the outside, so it serves as a reminder to you that that you shouldn't stir or you shouldn't play with the temperature. So today we don't stir the coals, right? But today we might play with the temperature. I'm afraid, this is going to get overcooked. This is going to, this or that. So we need to make certain that we're not doing that. How do we do that? We put the blech. So with the crock pot, if you take a piece of silver foil, put it in between the pot and the mechanism, coming out, covering the knob, or at least, partially covering the knob. So it serves as a reminder that I should not play with the knob.
Is it okay to use a plastic crock pot liners? Or
Yes.
does it have to be foil?
Yes. No. I'm not your liner. You're talking about keeping the crock pot clean itself. That's a different thing. That's okay. That's not a problem. That's not the issue here. The issue over here is we're worried that maybe you're going to play, maybe because you want to have the food a little more cooked, a little less, a little more cooked. So you're going to play with the knob, right? That's
also with the
that's
blech.
nothing to do with the liner. The silver foil is a reminder for you that you should not play with the knob to that's the idea.
Right,
Rabbi,
thank
also,
you. I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish this very quickly. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, because I was just wondering if, I guess because it serves two different purposes, but I thought maybe the liner is in between the mechanism and the pot, but I guess
No, the
it's for a
liner,
different
no, the
purpose.
liner is in the pot. It's not between the mechanism. The mechanism,
Oh, got you.
think of the mechanism as the oven,
Mhm.
and then there's the pot that you're putting in the oven. Think of it that way, right?
Right, now I got it.
So the mechanism is the oven. It's the coals, right, so to speak, in the oven.
Mhm.
So to remind you that you shouldn't play with the knob, that's why we put something in between. And we learned that in the previous chapter. I should have mentioned that that's today's application.
So thank you very much. Even if it's programmed, you still have to do the foil, correct?
Yes, you should do that. Yes,
Thank you.
you should do that.
Rabbi?
Eugenia or Batya, I don't know who was next.
Rabbi?
Go ahead, Batya.
I wanted to also just make a comment that when you have, like, say, for instance, if you have your soup on the blech and it's covered, you should not be covering it back up again, because it actually cools it off, and then you put the top back on and it heats it up again. So that's something that we shouldn't be doing too.
I mean, taking the blech off, is that what you're saying? I'm
No, not taking the blech off. If you have a soup on the blech and you're keeping it warm for Shabbos, you should not, like, in other words, serve it while it's on the blech with
right.
the
Yeah, you have to
top
take it
covered and
off.
covered.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Thank you.
And with the crock
Yeah.
pot, you can also, with the crock pot as well, you cannot recover it again after you are serving.
could. No, we learned that you could take the crock pot off from its cooking element. You can take the pot off with intention to put it back, but you can't put it down. You need to put it down in a manner like the edge of the table, for example, that it needs your assistance to keep it, from falling. So therefore, in that instance, you can open it up, take out chulent, and put it back.
Okay,
You
thank you.
such a way. Okay, is that clear?
That's clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're learning Rambam, and now that we got a few moments until Yosef will be here in a moment, we can go back and get some of the clearer halachas. Eugenia, sorry, go ahead.
I think you sort of answered my question, because I have a programmable crock pot, and I do have the foil in between the element. But especially in the summer, in the long summer days, my question was, am I allowed to remove the food from it but keep the rest on warm, so it could be used to stay warm for a couple of
again,
minutes?
because just as a reminder, remember that this is a rabbinic decree. It's a gzeira, rabbinic decree, that you may come and stoke the coals or the whatever heating energy source, right? That you might come in and stoke it. So therefore, it's a decree, right? That being said, at the same time, since the thing has been cooked already, you're not cooking it on Shabbos, right? All you're doing is continuing the process. So, and this is the idea of our minds and the power of mindfulness, that when you're taking it out, it has to be, you're taking it out with the condition that you're going to return it to the same place, right? And you didn't put it on the ground or let go of it. In this instance, is you don't let go of it and you leave it on the edge. In such an instance, you can bring it back to the original place in the crock pot and let it continue to, what is it doing? Remember, keeping it warm, it's cooked already. You're just keeping it warm. And even keeping it more cooked is like, the biblical prohibition is the act of cooking. But if it's already all cooked, the chulent's cooked, and now you're just putting it back and keeping it warm, and then that's okay. If you took it off before it was cooked, and now you put it back on to complete its cooking, that would be a problem. But we're talking about that it is cooked. Is that clear, the distinction?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Tanya, clear? Liba, everybody?
Yes, clear. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
What's going on with me? Give me just a moment here. I know what's happening. Yosef? Any other questions? Oh, all right. Here we go. Okay. Yosef, hold on.
I'm really sorry for the delay.
We're glad you're here.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. And let's start off. We're holding by Perek Gimel here, Perek Aleph.
No, we're Perek Hey.
Okay, here, Perek Hey. Right here, just opening it up right on my computer. Okay. Perek Hey. Chapter number 5. Hadlakas Neir B'Shabbos Einer Shus. V'im Ratza Einer Hadlakas Neir B'Shabbos Einer Shus. Im Ratza Madlik, Im Ratza Einer Madlik. Lighting candles on Shabbos, it's not like you decide if I want to, I do it, if not, not. And it's not a mitzvah that you don't have to chase after. Meaning, let's say, for example, the mitzvah of Eruv, you don't have to do it. If you decide not to, you don't have to. You decide not to eat food that you need to wash, you don't have to. But this, you must light Shabbos candles. Both men and women must have candle lit in their house. Even if you don't have what to eat, go ask, go borrow, and have enough oil or candle to light. And you have to make a blessing before you light. Like you do make a bracha for anything that is commanded by the rabbis and not a biblical commandment. Number 2, you're allowed to use that light on Shabbos as long as you don't need to really focus and it doesn't require careful scrutiny. But something that does require precise scrutiny, so don't use the candle because we're afraid you're going to tilt the candle a little bit in order for you to look at it better. And you're not allowed to touch the candle on Shabbat. Number 3, when should you light? You have to light while it's still day, before sunset. And women are more, it's a greater obligation for women to do it more than men because the house is their house and they're more involved in household tasks. But nevertheless, the husbands and the men in the house need to be involved. They should be involved in a way to make sure, help set up the candles and remind them if they need a reminder to light the candles, to make sure they do it before sunset. Now, if you have a doubt if sunset happened already, if Shabbos began, do not light the candles. Number 4, now from sunset until night, which is when 3 stars come out, it's called Ben Hashmash, is like the twilight. And that time, the twilight time is we don't know if it's day or night. It's between day and night. So now we use this time in a stringent concern, which means the twilight before Shabbat, even though maybe it's Friday, maybe it's Shabbat, we say it's Shabbat. Now the twilight at the end of Shabbat, when we say maybe it's Shabbat, and maybe it's Motzei Shabbat, maybe it's Sunday already, so we say that's Shabbat. That's why Shabbos is more than 24 hours, because you have both Ben Hashmashot on both ends. And if you do something that is not allowed to be done on Shabbat, on both the twilight before Shabbat and after, if you do by mistake, you have to bring the karban chatas. When is considered the night? Now we have calendars and we have the clock and we have everything. We're talking about back in the day when they didn't have this. So they would measure it by vision. So when you saw 3 stars, not tiny stars and not massive stars, 3 medium-sized stars, then it was considered night. Number 5. A Shabbos light the wick that's used should not be a wick that makes the flame flicker. For example, for example, if you make it out of wool, goat's hair, silk, fiber, flax that wasn't worked through, some from palm, and various types of soft trees. Ella, midavar sha'or nislis, but rather do it with something that can hold the flame steady. For example, flax that was worked out properly, or linen cloths, or cotton, or the like. And the person that lights should make sure that the fire has caught the majority of the wick. Number 6, if you took a substance that you should use for the wick, right? And you put that on the outside, but on the inside you put the substance that we said is not good for a wick. If the intent of that was in order to make the wick thicker, to increase the light, then it's forbidden. But if you put in the substance in the middle in order to make it stand tall so it doesn't go from one side to the other, then it is permitted. Number 9. You can put a grain of salt or a bean at the opening of the lamp on Friday so that it will burn better. All these things that we're saying that are not good material to use for wicks for Shabbos, you are allowed to use it if you want to make a fire to heat up the house, if you want to put on a bigger lantern, or whatever you want to do. It is only prohibited to use it solely in regards to a wick of this candle, of this Shabbos candle. Number 8, shemen shemadlik by the Shabbos. Now, what about fuel that you're using? If you're not using a candle for this, that you have to make sure that it draws after the wick. It's the type of fuel that draws after the wick. But fuels that do not draw after the wick, for example, tar or beeswax or gourd oil or sheep's tail, or tallow, these things, they do not follow the wick properly. Therefore, you shouldn't use it. Now, what's the reason why we don't use these type of material for wicks, and what's the reason why we don't use these type of oils? So we say we're afraid that it will the light that comes from these type of candles or these type of oils is not enough. It's going to be dim, and therefore if you need to use it, you'll tilt the candle in order to see better. So we want a candle or a wick from the oil that's going to have a beautiful flame, that you won't touch it on Shabbat. Number 9, you're allowed to use the inside of, let's say, the inside of a fish or the inside of a tallow in order to put oil in there in order to light it. Meaning that could be but fuels that are not allowed to be used on Shabbos may not be even mixed with fuels that you're not allowed. Before we said that wicks, you could sometimes combine the two, but when it comes to oil, you're not allowed to. If it's no good, it's no good. Number 10, you should not light pine sap for fuel because the smell is bad. It smells bad, so you're going to leave the room. The whole point of the light is that you should sit there and enjoy your Shabbos. You also are not allowed to you're not allowed to use it with bitsari.
Balsam oil.
Balsam oil. You're not allowed to use balsam oil because balsam oil smells great, and you might take it into the other room that you want it. Also, balsam oil is extremely flammable, so we'd rather not. Also, you shouldn't use white naphtha for a flam, even during the week, because it's so flammable. It can be you're bringing a danger into your home. Number 11. Now, all other type of oils you're allowed to. Radish oil, sesame oil, turnip oil, or the like. The only ones that are not allowed are the ones that our sages have told us clearly that they're no good. Anything else is permissible. Number 12. A person should not place a container with a hole filled with oil above the opening of the lamp so the oil will drip in, meaning while the lamp is going, so you have more oil coming in. And likewise, you shouldn't have a plate of oil and then you take a wick from the bowl that's holding the wick of oil and you bring it in. So like you have a plate of oil and you have a bowl of oil and you have a wick, and then you have a wick drawing in here. So this way, when the bowl runs out, you're taking from the plate. Don't do that. We're afraid that you're going to take from the oil of the second vessel, the one that does not have the flame in it. And it is forbidden to do that on Shabbos. Why? Because something that was already designated for a candle on Shabbos is muktzah, is not allowed to be touched, even if the candle is extinguished. So we're afraid the actual candle you won't do because you might remember. But the second vessel, we're afraid that you may say, it's a second vessel, so it's not really taking from it. So therefore, don't even set it up like that on Shabbos. But if you connected it, if you connected the two of them, they're not just two separate things. You connected it with glue or you attached it with clay or cement, then you're allowed, because now then you can put oil in it because it's one vessel. We're not afraid that you're going to take oil from there. Number 13. Don't place a container under a lamp to collect the dripping oil, because then you're making this vessel, you're not allowed to touch it on Shabbat. And now, till now, you're allowed to touch it on Shabbat. But now that you put it to drip the oil, you're not allowed to touch. So you took a vessel that you weren't allowed to touch, that you were allowed to touch, and made it into something you're not allowed to touch. But if you did it from before Shabbat, then you're allowed. But you're allowed to put it under there to get the sparks, because the sparks, they're nullified. They don't really carry any substance, and therefore it doesn't make the vessel no good anymore. But you're not allowed to fill it up with water, because then when you fill it up with water, what you're doing is you're making the sparks extinguish quicker, and that is not allowed to do on Shabbat. Number 14, you're not allowed to check your garments for lice with this candle, and you should not use it to read, even if it's high, the amount of 2 stories. Even 10 homes, one on top of the other, and the candles on top. You shouldn't use it because we're afraid that you're going to forget and move it. If there's 2 people, you're learning with a study partner, then you're allowed to, because each one will remind the other one that you're not allowed to touch it. But that's only if you're studying the same thing together. But if you're studying 2 separate things, then we're afraid that each one is going to be immersed in what he's studying and won't be there to help his friend and remind him that he's not allowed to do it. 15. But if you're studying by a teacher, then you're allowed, because the teacher will make sure you don't touch the candle.
Children, right?
What?
Children is, yeah? Specifically children, is it?
It says children, but I guess it means any teacher.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's only children. Could be it's only children. And the reason why they're allowed to use this candle is because the teacher will make sure. But he can't use it because the students won't. He will not fear the students to reprehend him. So therefore, it's not going to work for him. But you're allowed to look at the scroll by the light of the lamp to find the beginning of what you're learning. But then you give it to them, meaning the teacher is allowed to use it in order to find the place, but then he should give it to the students and let the students use it in front of the candle. Number 16. 2 vessels that are very similar and you want to distinguish them, you cannot bring it close to the candle, because then you really need to use the candles to identify them, or afraid you're going to touch the lamp. Therefore, if you have an attendant that is new and doesn't know, he's not a permanent attendant, he doesn't know, so he should not be using this candle, because he really needs to look carefully. But if somebody's more familiar, then he's allowed to. Whether it's a lamp of olive oil or a lamp that's uses for kerosene, even though the kerosene gives a lot of light, and nevertheless you shouldn't use it. But an attendant that's a permanent employee, he already knows what's going on. He knows the vessels. He doesn't really need to have much scrutiny. Therefore, he can use it. But if it's olive oil, we should tell the attendant not to, because we're afraid that he's going to take from the olive oil that's usually being used for the candle. Number 17, if you have a candle behind the door, you can't open or close the door. We're afraid that the wind will extinguish the candle, unless you're very careful. You're also not supposed to leave the door open and the wind from the outside will come in and extinguish the candle, unless only even if it's just a regular wind, it's still not allowed. You are allowed to put the candle on top of a tree that is connected to the ground, and even if there's winds outside, you don't have to worry about that. Number 18, but because you're not intentionally doing something. Here we're talking about opening the door, closing the door. Those things you're not allowed to do. Here, if you put it on Shabbos, before Shabbos in the tree, it's fine. Call Hamedinos Vayar Shal Yisrael Taikin Bahem Sheish Tkiyas B'Erev Shabbos. If you're ever in Crown Heights, you hear a big siren before Shabbos starts. I don't know, or in Yerushalayim. So they take it from the Maimonides. The Maimonides says that all towns that are Jewish towns, you should blow the shofar 6 blasts on Erev Shabbos. And they would do it on a high mountain in order everyone should hear. Now we're going to go through the details of what those 6 blasts are. The first blast, all the people that were working in the fields, all the people that were in the fields, they stopped. All the people in the fields, they stopped plowing, they stopped digging and performing the labors of the field. And the people that were far away waited for the people that were closer in order that they should all walk into the city together. One second. And the stores and the shops were still open. That's for the first blast. At the second blast was sounded, they would close the shutters of the stores, and they would close this and they would close the stores and they would lock the stores. Hot water and pots may still be left to cooking by the second blast. When they heard the third blast, then when the third shofar blast, once you take off all your pots and you cover what needs to be covered in insulated materials, and you light the Shabbos candles. And a person should wait the time it takes to roast a small fish or to stick a loaf of bread on the side of the oven. And then they would blow. That was after the third one. They would wait, meaning give that time for people to take off the food and cover it over and light the Shabbat candles. And then they would blow a tkiya, a teruah, and a tkiya, and then that was Shabbos. So those are the 6. The first one they would blow by mincha, and the third one that was done close to sunset. And also after Saturday night, after Shabbat, they would also blow in order to let people know the Shabbos over, they go back to the work. Yom Kippurim, Shecholi is bad of Shabbos. Obviously, if Yom Kippur fell on Shabbat, so you're not allowed to blow, so they did not blow on Shabbat. On Erev Shabbos, which was Yom Kippur, Cholias, but Motzei Shabbos, and then likewise, if Yom Kippur fell out on Sunday, so Motzei Shabbat, they would not make Havdalah and they would not blow the shofar. Yom Tov Cholias, Erev Shabbos, taking V'loy Mavdilin, but Yom Tov that fell out on Erev Shabbos, they actually would blow, but they would not make Havdalah for the holiday going into Shabbat. Cholias Lachar Shabbos, Mavdilin V'loy taking if the holiday fell on after Shabbat, meaning Saturday night on Sunday, then they would actually make Havdalah, should be recited, but they would not blast the shofar because it was a holiday and they don't go back to work. And with that, we conclude the 3rd chapter of the laws of Shabbat.
Yes. The 5th chapter we finished. 3rd chapter from today, but the 5th chapter, because we started yesterday. All right, beautiful. Any questions? Everybody's clear. Beautiful. All right, amazing learning. Amazing. Tim, I'm going to reach out to you so we can see about the YouTube. Okay.
Rabbi.
Yes, Bati, you have a question.
Yes. Where are our shofars? Here. Where are our shofars here in Montreal?
In Crown Heights, they have a buzzer that goes out. It's on Kingston Avenue. There's a horn that blows, that blasts. If you're close to it, it's not so pleasant. But it blasts to let everybody know that Shabbos is coming. 10 minutes to Shabbos, 3 minutes to lighting candles, something like that. I don't remember the exact times. Yeah, so we don't have it here, but yeah, something to come. All right, beautiful. Thank you, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you,
night.
everybody.
Okay.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much, rabbis.
God bless you all.
Thank you so much.
Be well. Bye-bye.